Welcome back to Shrinking It Down, Mental Health Made Simple. I'm Gene Beresin.
And I'm wearing a jacket today, and I'm Steve Schlozman.
But you're not wearing a tie.
I'm not wearing a tie.
Okay.
I'm wearing neither a jacket nor a tie, and I'm Ellen Braaten.
And today we have
slice all that out. If we need to. Yeah.
Today we're going to be talking about a film, actually, that will be released during the Special Olympics, which is coming up, called Greatest Strengths, Meeting Challenges with Courage. So today we thought we would talk about challenges that we all have in life, and all of us have various challenges. And I'll just start with something that's really minor that my kids give me, grief about. I have a variation of what's called Schlozman syndrome, which actually the kids call Girly-Man syndrome, trying to imitate Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I can't tell my left from my right very well, and I have trouble with math.
Look, what side am I on?
You're in the right. I know that, but when I'm driving,
that makes me feel good.
When I'm driving and I want to make a left, I know I should probably make a right. So I kind of mix up my left and my right, and I was always never good in math, and I don't know how I got through physics. That's kind of minor, and I've learned how to cope with it. In fact, I have coped with it. But there are many, many more challenges. So we can tell our own challenges. Ellen, what challenges do you happen to have?
So I actually have a mild dyslexia, and people are sort of surprised about that because I write a lot for a living. But I actually really had to try very hard to read, even though I loved reading, and I read as much as I could as a kid. And I'm a terrible speller. I'm still a really, really bad speller. And so, yeah, it's been something that I didn't discover until I started evaluating kids with dyslexia. And then the next generation in my family started to get evaluated, and we all realized that we're kind of the same.
And don't you have a brother that has some challenges?
I do. I have a brother with Down syndrome, and he is, he's in his 40s. He's doing very well, but it was a very wonderful thing growing up with a brother who had some real challenges. And I know a lot of people would think that doesn't sound that wonderful, but it really was, because he was my brother. And
how did he and your family help him cope? Because Down syndrome is a pretty significant problem.
It is, and it comes with normally intellectual deficiency, and sometimes other physical issues like heart problems that sometimes can decrease your lifespan. That's changed a lot over the last few decades. So now they have a lifespan that's similar to other people without Down syndrome. But my family treated him like anybody else. And my mother really fought for him. He was born at a time in the 70s, I guess, late 70s, where special education services weren't a right. That sort of time in our history when we sort of thought about rights for the disabled was a civil rights issue. And he kind of grew up at the beginning of those times. And so he got a lot of great support, but we had to really fight for it. And when I say we, it was sort of a family effort. So,
I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about because there's nobody who doesn't have challenges, right? So, and so your brother, that's a significant challenge, and what helped him was the family, the community, the schools, and folks kind of fighting for him and helping him. And all the stories I've heard about your brother, he's delightful. He's done really, really well. So you can have a significant challenge like your brother's and do really, really well. You can have Girly-Man syndrome or whatever you called it, and really flub up like you did. No, I'm like do well.
I flubbed up.
Right? Like people do well. But there are also some really significant challenges out there, which we have in that film, which
Yes.
are like, it's kind of stunning when you watch it and see these kids do things that
Amazing.
I'm not sure I could do in the absence of those challenges. Well, I know I couldn't do it in the absence of those challenges.
So how do you think they became so resilient? I mean, what are the elements, just to help the viewers, what are the elements that can help kids and young adults that have challenges?
I'm sure that we could answer that in a lot of ways. So we got to define resiliency, right? And most folks would say that resiliency isn't this ability to overcome so much is to tolerate the thing itself and to get through it. You know what I mean? So like, you could say, how did I become resilient to my inability to dunk a basketball? I will never, ever be able, I could try for the rest of my life. I'm 5'6". Yeah, I'm short. I'm not going to dunk a basketball. It's not going to happen. My resiliency was I worked on a jump shot, right? Now I can't do that either. But at a time when I liked to play basketball, I thought if I can't dunk a basketball, do a jump shot. That's a kind of minor resiliency for a very, very minor challenge. For the kids who are in this film, I think they became resilient because somebody, well, my guess is somebody told them they couldn't in some ways. Like somebody said, like, you can't do that. You're not, your body won't let you do that. And they said, I'm gonna prove you wrong.
Yeah, resiliency comes from the ability to bounce back from a challenge, but you have to have challenges.
Yeah.
And for kids with disabilities, that's already built in. It's a built-in opportunity in a way, because bouncing back is what they constantly have to do.
One of the things that troubles me, by the way, about that is that they do bounce back, but as we know, kids who have disabilities and adults are often stigmatized, they're scapegoated, they're picked on, that in itself is a challenge because they're different. And I hope that one of the messages that will come out of this film and out of our discussion will be to be more inclusive and to kind of accept differences as kind of like something that we all have, and be more sensitive.
Yeah, but you know what? So just to push back, I agree with, obviously I agree with what we're saying here, but we just finished saying that the reason these kids become resilient is because somebody told them they couldn't, kind of presented them with the challenge. It's a bit of a tightrope to say we will be accepting and inclusive, but also know that what might propel some of these kids forward is saying, nevertheless, with all of our acceptance, we don't think this is such a good idea for you. Yeah. Look, my wife doesn't mind my saying this. My wife is blind. My wife is legally blind. She cannot drive a car by the law. She has a genetic disorder. And she was told in her third year of medical school, you can't be a doctor. You just can't do it. We're not going to throw you out, but we're not going to let you stick around and be a doctor. And
but she became a doctor.
Yeah, she got her PhD and her MD. She worked really, really hard. But it was that sort of, once she said, I disagree, then they were accepting of her. So it's this interesting moment. And I would think the best mentors and teachers and clinicians or whatever can say to a kid, you sure you want to do this? Sort of explore it with them. She got really angry, so you don't have to say you can't do this. You could say, okay, this is going to be hard. Let's look at what it's going to take.
So we want to be inclusive, but we also want to be realistic about what limitations. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if this quite applies, but I'm thinking about an experience that I had when I was younger with my brother. And I must have been somewhere in my early teens, and so he was, I don't know, younger than I was. And I remember walking home from school with him, and he was speaking to me, but he speaks with sort of a slur to his speech, but he has plenty to say. And some kids in the neighborhood were walking by and were making fun of his speech. They were parroting him. And I was so angry. And they were older boys, and I got really angry. So I came home to my mother and I was like, we're going to find those boys. We are going to go get them. And maybe I was even as young as like 12.
This is like a scene of Stranger Things. Did the thing from the Upside Down come?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was like, you need to call their mother, and they need to. And my mom said to me, Ellen, he's going to be fighting these battles all of his life. Like, I can't fight them for him. He's going to have to do that himself. So this is his life. And the more we can just sort of take it in stride and ignore them and realize we are better than they are. And it was sort of an interesting way. And that would come up every once in a while when things would happen with him, and I wanted to be the big sister who was going to protect him. And she, sometimes she would say, yes, I need to call a teacher. And other times she'd say, this is his life, and you need to sort of accept that about your brother. I'm not sure that's exactly what you're talking about, but
I think it's really similar.
But, yeah.
I think that's the challenge here. That's our challenge as the folks who are helping people with challenges. It's to try and figure out how to pitch the issue to these kids so that they can roll with it, pick their challenge, like the challenge within their challenge, decide what bar they're going to jump towards, maybe raise the bar just a little bit more so they can jump even higher, but not so high that they feel defeated. It's a really it's a bi-directional thing, right? Like your mom presumably sat down with your brother at some point and said, "Hey, these kids said not nice things to you. Let's ignore it." And then your brother had to agree to it.
Yeah, and in some ways, you know, with my brother's disability, a lot of it does go past him. Like a lot of it is, that's a blessing in some ways, that he just doesn't, and he, you know.
He's oblivious to it, or?
I don't think he would have noticed, because in that case, I'm thinking about that case, he would have just really been very connected with me. We were talking and having a conversation.
So he
and these other people were making fun of him, just walking by and making fun of him. He wouldn't have noticed that, because that's not where he just
He's not wired that way.
He's not wired that way.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, if we get.
But if somebody picked on somebody in his family, he would be quite upset.
Yeah, he'd be a bulldog on that.
He was
A
wired.
bulldog.
Yeah.
So if we think of these kids in this film, which is really cool, and we're psyched to release
it's
it.
a really cool film.
So we're tying it to the Special Olympics. The slight risk is we're saying that in order to overcome your challenge, you must excel in this incredibly massive way, like we're seeing in the Special Olympics, we see in the kids in this film, who have done amazing things. And I don't know that that's certainly a great message, but it's not the only message. It can't be.
It's not. I mean, you know, many of the kids that I know that have challenges, whether they're psychiatric or physical, they just want to be accepted. They just want to kind of like grow up and be a part and be included and you know, and do what they want to do. They don't necessarily want to be the super best at anything super special, but they just want to be who they are.
And yet we're showing this film of people being the super best at what they do.
Which actually, you know, I mean, yes. So in some ways, what you're saying is a really important kind of like commentary on the film, and that is these kids really did excel at dancing, swimming, you know, hurdling,
Blacksmithing
with
one arm.
Oh my gosh! So, but it doesn't mean you have to be super special at something to kind of like overcome a challenge, which is your point.
Yeah. Well, or to have it be declared that the challenge is overcome. You were about to say something. Well,
yeah.
No, I think that I think thinking about excelling at something, I think you have to find a passion for something, despite when you're talking about your wife, that she was passionate about medicine despite her challenges. And does that mean that she has to be a remarkable doctor, even though she is? No, but she's passionate about something, and I think that sort of love and interest doesn't you know, you're limited sometimes when you have a disability in what you can pursue, but the passion itself, the reason for wanting to be and do and to feel like you're useful and that you're contributing, I think that's the excelling.
you know what else is interesting? One of the people in the film I know, and he's given us permission to talk about it, and he's missing an arm, and he's introduced me to the sort of world of people who are missing limbs and are interested in design. And one of the questions they're asking is, who said that this is the best design for what you need to do? Like 5 fingers and a hand. So most prosthetic designers are people who have all their limbs.
Right.
And so they just assume that that's what we want. And he showed me this website where people are building all sorts of limbs that have like an extra finger that goes out here, all still that can be connected up to the nervous system. And he said, what makes you think yours is best? Just because it's what you got.
So he's found his own world in a way.
Yeah, it's...
Or his own perspective, which is his perspective.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think is so cool about that is it broadened my perspective. Like,
yes,
like
it
it
changed
didn't
you.
I just thought, how else would you have a hand? You would have an opposable thumb and 4 fingers. How it ought to be, right? And anything short of that is not proper. And he said, who says?
So are there any, as we wind down, are there any tips that we want to give parents about if you have a kid with a challenge of one kind or another, what would be some of the major take-home messages that we would want to kind of have them kind of like think about?
So acceptance is the thing that comes to mind, because that's kind of what we're talking about, accepting yourself for who you are. It's really the challenge that all of us have in our lives. I mean, it's one of the hardest things to do. We oftentimes don't like what we have, and want what we don't have, and so I think that's the important thing. And I oftentimes think parents with disabilities, when they have that acceptance, the child can grow into that so easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because you sometimes I meet parents who say, like I work in the transplant service, and they say, we have to get Sally to talk about her transplant in class. And that would be fine.
Transplant of
her liver. She has somebody else's liver. This is a reason she's missed some school. I'm making this up. This is just a made-up Sally person, but it's a fairly typical story. This would be fine if Sally were interested in talking about it, but she's not. She didn't want to. Sally doesn't want to draw attention. Sally wants to talk about her creative writing or her poetry. She really doesn't want to talk about her transplant. And the parents sort of get hung up on this idea that you have to be being proud of who you are and of this thing that characterizes you, or among the things which happens to be this transplant, you have to make public. So I think the other tip is that you want to make allowance for your child's temperament. And if they're not into there's plenty of things they're going to have to talk about.
temperament meaning?
Like who they intrinsically are, like how they're wired
She's not
from the day they're
She's not a
born.
transplanted liver.
Yeah.
People who are more on the introverted side get their energy and they're able to process more by going inward. People who are more extroverted, and this is a gross exaggeration, but looking at some of those sort of temperamental or personality issues, some people really are able to process that by talking about it.
Yeah.
And other people need a combination. But that's just an example of.
So there is no, you were asking for
There's-
tips.
yeah.
Know
There's
your
just,
kid.
just no one size fits all.
So
There
know
can't
your
be.
kid.
Right.
Know your kid.
And knowing your kid might mean as they get older, since they tend to roll their eyes more and talk less, you might have to ask them, how do you want to handle this?
I also think getting more information about your child's disability or their abilities, I think, is really important. But you can't really accept what you don't know, and you can be awfully afraid of what you don't know too. So, and that might mean, depending on your child's issues, talking to an orthopedic surgeon or a psychiatrist or a neuropsychologist or whatever it is. But getting more, if you sort of feel ambivalent as a parent, you probably are lacking some kind of information.
So one of the things we can do from the Clay Center side of things is we can help inform parents and kids about disabilities, about challenges, about what the ins and outs are, and give them a variety of kind of.
But wait, we're missing a really important part here. The other thing we can do, this has been my experience so many times, is I've learned so much from people who come to me and say, hey, did you know about this new treatment? Did you?
Right.
So we can be aware that there's just no possible way anybody can know everything. The parents can't know, we can't know. The only way is to sort of get this iterative knowledge that comes from us talking to each other, so we can listen to what people tell us too. And if we swap stuff back and forth and keep our eyes open, I think that'll increase the overall, the rising tide thing. So.
And now it's time for
Monumental.
mental health myth.
I get so anxious that you won't be able to say it, so I have to.
Well, it's like a tongue twister.
It is not like it is. In
It is
fact,
a
tongue
it
twister.
is a tongue twister.
Right.
So
Okay. This is really important. It's important that we stress this. Most people with disabilities or differences would rather you not mention it. I think we do this a lot when we draw these cards out. We've already talked about this, but it is a super important thing. It is true that some would rather you not talk about it, and some would rather you talk about it, and some don't really care. So I think it probably has to do with the kid, and also it changes over time too. So you can't assume that what they were comfortable talking about when they were 10 is what they'll be comfortable talking about when they're 12 and 15 and 27 and so forth. It just changes.
it does change. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, but the worst thing we could do is ignore it, ignore what their wishes are, or pretend that something doesn't exist when it does.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we have to ask in a non-offensive way.
Yeah, and acknowledging what is right for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you all very much for watching. This is actually our last episode of the season. Stay tuned for more episodes of Shrinking It Down.
Were we renewed? We got renewed for the next season?
Yes.
Yeah, good. I'm teasing. Of course.
Of course we got renewed.
Yes, good.
Stay tuned. If you have any questions, comments, or you want to tell us your own. As Steve said, we would love to hear your own stories about your challenges, either your own or your kids. Write to us, email us, tell us your stories. I'm Gene Beresin.
Steve Schlozman.
Ellen Braaten.
See you next time.